Hiya folks. Today I want to talk about Samadhi. Now Samadhi is one of these words that if you're watching a channel like this one you've probably heard and maybe you have some ideas about, but let's define it. I'll take the definition from the glossary in the back of this book, Pointers from Nisargadatta Maharaj by Ramesh Balsekar. And this is an interesting book. I'm almost finished with it, as you can see, but not quite, so I guess I can't say anything about it. But I found it very fascinating because the Advaita Vedanta tradition and the Zen tradition are very similar, and probably when I was first looking for a spiritual tradition to get into, I think what I was looking for was Advaita Vedanta. I didn't know at the time that's what it was called, but I had this sort of vague inkling of some sort of Hindu tradition that was out there that was into this sort of non-dualistic, which I wouldn't have known that word either, but I had some inkling of this thing being around, but I couldn't find it, and I ended up with Zen, and I'm not unhappy with that, and I think things worked out pretty well. But to go back and look at this Advaita Vedanta version, which is quite similar but in some ways quite different from Zen, is just really fascinating for me lately. But let's read the definition of Samadhi that appears in the back of this book. Samadhi: superconscious state, profound meditation, from sam together plus a to plus d, placing or putting together, so it's putting things together. Samadhi is a yogic practice in which the seeker, sadhaka, becomes one with his object of meditation, thus attaining unqualified bliss. And it also says that samadhi is used as a word for a memorial to a saint that could be a brick or stone construction. Mahasamadhi stands for the death of a saint who is believed to have attained a permanent superconscious state on the dissolution of his physical body. So that's their definition. Now, what's interesting, and I should point this out, is it's funny that that definition appears in the book because Nisargadatta Maharaj, in this book and the other book I've read of his teachings, doesn't really talk very much about samadhi or superconscious states. What makes me think he's very similar to Zen is he keeps pointing to this state that you're actually in as being the state, the superconscious state, or whatever you want to call it. Now, I happened to go back and read this book, or a chapter of this book, because I remembered there was a chapter called Zanmai O Zanmai, the Samadhi that is the King of Samadhis. And this appears as the final chapter in Book 3 of Shobogenzo, the Nishijima cross translation. It is 72nd chapter, chapter 72. In this chapter, and I'm not going to read it to you, but it's very short, it's only 3 pages, but he talks about this samadhi, and when he's talking about samadhi, he's talking about zazen. And he's not saying that samadhi is a superconscious state that is achieved in zazen. He's saying that zazen itself is samadhi. In this version, Nishijima and Cross have translated Kekkafuza as the full lotus posture, and I gather that Kazuaki Tanahashi and the group at San Francisco Zen Center don't like using that, but that's literally what it means. Now, it does not follow that doing zazen in anything other than the full lotus posture is wrong or anything. It's just that this is his euphemism for zazen, is full lotus posture. You could do it in Burmese posture, you could do it in seiza, you can do it in all sorts of other versions. And in fact, I'm going to put a link below to a new video that we have just put together. When I say we, I mean Dave Cuomo and the guys, the people, not just men and women, of the Angel City Zen Center put together on how to do zazen. So there'll be a link below to that. Click on it. It's pretty good. But they talk about the other positions anyway, so ignore the fact that he's saying full lotus, but I'm going to read it that way because that's the translation. To transcend the whole universe at once, to live a great and valuable life in the house of the Buddhist patriarchs, is to sit in the full lotus posture, to tread over the heads of non-Buddhists and demons, to become in the inner sanctum of the Buddhist patriarchs, or we would say Buddhist ancestors. A person in the concrete state is to sit in the full lotus posture. So that's what you do, the concrete state of the supreme superconscious, if we want to use Nisargadatta Maharaja's or Ramesh Balsakar's terminology, state is the full lotus posture. And this is the innovation that Dogen brought from China from his teacher Tendo Nyojo. Was this idea that there isn't a difference. There isn't a superconscious state that you attain in the full lotus posture. The full lotus posture, or Burmese, or Seiza, or whatever you happen to do, Zazen itself is the Samadhi. Now, one way to understand this that works for me, I don't know, works for everybody, is to connect it with this little chapter that I talked about in my book, It Came From Beyond Zen, Jinzu. And as you can see, it's translated as mystical power. And another translation I've seen is miracles. There's probably other translations for that, but mystical power is probably good enough, or miracles is probably good enough. And in this chapter, Dogen talks about some of the miracle stories that appear in Buddhist literature. One of my questions when I first started studying Buddhism with Tim McCarthy, the first time I raised my hand in class, and I can remember this, very clearly, was, are there any miracle stories in Buddhism? I had no idea about Buddhism. And he said, well, yeah, there are a few, and he mentioned one about the Buddha flying up into the air and emitting fire from his mouth and water from his butt, or something crazy like that. There are other stories, and as it turns out, there's numerous miracle stories in the Buddhist literature. But the approach to them is not the same as what you find in, I don't want to say Christianity as a whole, but at least in the version of Christianity that I was exposed to when I was a youngster. And probably the reason I had asked Tim this question is because I remember a little bit before that having a conversation with one of the guys from the Campus Christian Ministries, or whatever they were called, in the student center at Kent State University, because I was becoming very, very interested in religious matters. And he said that Jesus was reported to have done miracles, and that his followers, his immediate disciples, the 12 disciples, chose to die rather than recant those stories, because there's stories in the later post-Jesus dying version of, or post-Jesus dying and resurrecting, however you want to put it, version of Christianity that talk about the disciples being tortured to death because they wouldn't recant the stories of the miracles that they'd seen. And therefore I should believe that Jesus could do miracles, and therefore I should believe that he was magic, and therefore I should believe that everything he said was true. But that didn't make any sense to me, because you can't rely on stories that are that old, and because somebody did miracles, does that mean that everything they said was correct? I couldn't follow that logic. So that's probably why I asked about miracles. And what Dogen says in this chapter I thought was really, really good. And he basically says, okay, here's this miracle, here's that miracle, here's the other miracle. He doesn't do a Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris type of thing and try to say, no, those miracles never happened because it's scientifically impossible, blah, blah, blah. It's, we don't believe in those miracles. He seems to accept the stories as true. Well, he doesn't deny them, or doesn't bother to deny them. He just presents them. But what he says is that the only reason these miracles could happen is because of the much greater miracle, which is this universe we're sitting in right now. So we tend to look at the universe that we're sitting in right now as kind of mundane, like this is just the ordinary stuff, whatever, brick wall behind me and some trees, and there was a dog, if you saw, walking around, that's just normal stuff. There's a guy with glasses on a video, and who cares? I want the miracles, I want the thing that happens that makes, water into wine, or flying through the air, or, something crazy like that. But he says the only place that these minor miracles, that he calls them, can take place, these kind of magic tricks and things, the only way these take place is in the great miracle that is existence itself. So don't worry about the minor miracles, pay attention to the great miracle. And I think that is the way to understand samadhi in Dogen's definition. Dogen's definition of samadhi isn't a special state that occurs within this mundane existence. Like we have this mundane existence, everything's going along, blah, 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 who cares, whatever. Then, whoa, superconscious state. That's so great, wonderful. And bells and whistles and fireworks going off and everything. That's not samadhi. Well, that's something, but it's not samadhi. What is samadhi is sitting very quietly and noticing the actual existence as it is, the mundane, so-called mundane existence of just ordinary things. Because what the heck is this? I'm breathing air. What is air? Why is there air? That's what Bill Cosby asked back when he was funny and not scary. What is all of this? It's a kind of miracle that we are living out day after day, moment after moment, and somehow just passing it by as if it's ordinary. And he's saying, no, this isn't ordinary. This is something special, and we use the Zazen practice to engage with the specialness that already is, the samadhi that already is, the superconsciousness, or whatever you want to say, that is already here and is already amazing. So, before I finish, this is not the money speech, so don't turn me off yet. We are having a retreat, and the first weekend of November, and it will be the first retreat that we are doing as Angel City Zen Center that is available online. So you'll be able to join the retreat online, and there will be information at the link I will provide below, probably below the link of the video that I told you about earlier, that will tell you how to join and all the other things you need to know about that. So anyone who wants to can join this retreat, because we're bringing the online community into our retreats. And we also have Zoom meetings where we do Zazen and talk every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So those are available as well for anybody who wants to join them. Now the money speech. If you want to support me personally, you can send a donation to the link you're seeing below on your screen right now. That is how I make my living. That's how I buy dog treats and human treats and everything else, like I said last time. I really appreciate it. If you are having money trouble and don't feel like donating, this is offered for free, so don't feel like you have to donate. But those of you who are donating are keeping me going, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. Have a good time all the time. See you later. Bye.